We're hearing the incredible stories of survival this morning, almost 10 days after the catastrophic earthquake hit Turkey and Syria, taking more than 41,000 people's lives, turning cities into piles of rocks. Desperation is growing, though, as rescuers are trying to work to find more survivors. They are still finding some of them, like the 77-year-old woman. You can see her there under rubble, 212 hours. The Turkish media just reported a short time ago that a woman and 2 children have also just been rescued after 228 hours in rubble after the quake hit. CNN's Sarah Seidner is on the ground for us in southeastern Turkey. Sarah, you've been doing incredible reporting on this, and in these stories that, amid the devastation with the death toll, it's remarkable to hear that people are still being found somehow.
It really is, Caitlin. We're standing in an area of survivors as well. They are in tents, though, because their homes have been destroyed. The Department of Emergency Services here has been able to put these up for about 100 families, and they are full families with children in tow who cannot go home to their respective apartments or homes. But we are seeing 9 days on what I can only call remarkable, if not miraculous, people still being pulled for the rubble after thousands of earth aftershocks and 2 major earthquakes. They're somehow surviving after that 72-hour time frame where usually people cannot survive. They're pulling out the elderly and the very young and everything in between. Firefighters scan the debris in Hatay for signs of life.
Tamam, göreyim seni. Neredesin? Yüzünü görebiliyor musun?
They ask him if there's anyone else with him and about his condition.
Geldik seni kurtarmaya, tamam mı?
It's okay, the 65-year-old Syrian man tells them. It was the 208th hour, the 9th day since the powerful earthquakes hit Turkey and Syria. 6 hours later, 77-year-old Fatma Gungor is pulled from under the rubble in Adıyaman. As the death toll climbs at terrifying speeds, these are rare rescues, and they've become the only source of hope. This has largely turned into a recovery operation. Focus is shifting towards sheltering tens of thousands of people made homeless by the disaster and burying tens of thousands of others. Families don't want to leave the site of their collapsed homes, hoping and praying to find loved ones, clinging to news of miracles. Brothers 17-year-old Muhammad Enes Yanar and his 21-year-old brother Abdul Baki were pulled from under a collapsed 8-story building in Kahramanmaraş. On the 198th hour, they stayed alive by eating protein powder.
Şunu kapatın.
In Adıyaman, rescuers tunneled through the debris to pull out 18-year-old Muhammed Kafir Sitin. This is well beyond the critical first 72 hours when most rescues happen. Now, many calls for silence to hear the faint voices of trapped survivors are met with deafening silence. Until another miracle happens. This 7-month-old baby was pulled from the rubble after 139 hours. After 167 hours under the suffocating debris, this man managed to pull himself out. Joyous moments keep up the spirits of exhausted rescuers. These brothers were pulled one after the other in Hatay after more than a week with little or no water under entangled slabs of concrete and steel. Many, though, will face a long recovery. Faris and Fatma were pulled out on the 209th hour. Their 5 children are believed to still be trapped underneath. The bitter realization that some people are the only surviving members of an extended family. But that does not stop the celebrations or the hope for yet another miracle. And you will notice that we're talking in terms of hours, and that's because with every hour that passes, the chances of survival are less and less, especially as we are now going into the 10th day since the initial 2 major earthquakes hit this region. I will tell you that we ourselves witnessed an area for those people who have survived. There are still hundreds more who have been killed. We witnessed a mass grave that took over basically half of a farm, a huge area where they were just digging grave after grave after grave, because they know they'll have a lot of people to bury, some who may never be identified. Caitlin.
Yeah, it's hard to even fathom what that's like for those families. But Sarah Sinder, we appreciate you being there. Thank you.
Joining me live now from Istanbul is Oben Çoban, spokesperson for Save the Children Turkey. Oben, thank you so much for being with us. I think that the stress on children here cannot be understated, because when you're a child, your brain is still developing. So you don't really, when you're 3 years old, when you're 4 years old, you don't really understand what an earthquake is. All you know at that point is that your home is gone. There's a lot of people who are sad, who are crying, who are seemingly distressed, and you can't find your mummy or your daddy. That's all you know. Just walk us through what the mental toll has been like on the youngest survivors over the past 9 days.
Yeah, unfortunately, at the 9th day of this grinding tragedy, I think what we are seeing is an absolute devastation of the lives of children themselves. Even the survivor children themselves, majority of them have already lost their parents. They just simply have no one in this life. And at the moment, what we know is those children are having severe syndromes of, post-traumatic stress, and they are having issues with anxiety. They're looking for their mummies and daddies. And we know we are at the very early stages of the crisis itself. The state organizations are still trying to get people out of the rubble. And at the moment, the focus is not 100% on the resilience of those children themselves. But what we are also seeing is those children who have lost their education, their families, their hopes, are right now struggling to, find a reason to keep themselves in this world. So they are in urgent need of finding the way to refresh themselves and get their hopes back in this life. Because at the moment we are talking about 10 cities along a fault line of 450 kilometers. 10 cities, many of them have been completely devastated. More than almost 15,000 buildings have collapsed. So for those children and their families, at the moment, the only thing that can keep them in the life is a hope for future. So as Save the Children, this is what actually we're trying to do in the field.
As somebody, speaking of myself here, somebody who lost a parent when I was very young, I know that one of the hardest things for the adults in my life was to explain to me and my siblings that our dad wasn't going to come home. So for the children here who have lost their parents, who still at this point don't realize that they've lost their parents, they're still asking, they're in the hospital, I assume, asking for mummy and daddy. What do you tell them?
Well, at the moment, Turkish Ministry of Family and its teams are on the ground and in the hospitals as well, and we are trying to provide the best support we can in the forms of mobile psychosocial support units and also ground units who will be giving out the best they can once they are called upon. But at the moment, actually, there is nothing to say. What we are right now trying to do is to find the way of keeping those children survive. And now with all the post-traumatic stress syndrome and other stuff we are trying to deal with at the early stages. And what needs to be done is to make sure, of course, with the help of international aid coming in as well, as many psychiatrists and psychologists possible coming into the field and dealing one by one with the children themselves on a tailored and personal basis.
Right, so when you have a child, let's say under the age of 10, who's pulled out from the rubble, who miraculously survived, 8 days, buried under the rubble in, by the way, the freezing cold. Obviously, the biggest concern would be, I'm assuming, hypothermia. You take them to the hospital. The pediatricians who are coming in from places like Istanbul tend to them. Once you make sure that they're okay from a physical perspective, what happens next in terms of who takes care of them?
Yeah, the principles of psychosocial first aid is definitely applied into. That's why all those rescue operations actually have to be made by authorized personnel who know what to say, what to do under those conditions. And the very first thing after the confirmation of the health of these children is to make sure that, I mean, they are taken to the specialist who can actually give out the psychological support those children will be needing at that instance. So those early hours, especially those first 24 hours, is extremely important. This is the session, this is the point where actually children are having the most hesitation about what's going on. So the very critical 24-hour, this passage is very important. That's why our experts, specialists, together with the experts in the country, are trying to find a way of keeping those children psychologically intact and as resilient as possible.